Well, a really gutsy decision by Keir Starmer announced today to abolish NHS England. Now, before anybody panics and thinks that this is closing down the NHS and we lose the NHS, that's obviously not the case. NHS England is the management body set up under Conservative government in 2013. So over 12 years, we've seen probably not the best management of our healthcare system that we could possibly imagine. And with a spend of £200 billion, it really does need some good management. So I've got a few thoughts about that in this video. But first of all, if you are new to me, I'm Daniel Smith, a barrister of England and Wales, and I like to give you my honest views on these things sometimes. And yes, some people don't like personal opinions, but if they are personal opinions, I'll make them known. But otherwise, just an objective view and saying things that the mainstream media generally won't say. So please do subscribe to the channel if you like this neutral, independent, objective approach, with a sprinkling of my own personal opinion now and again, and I'll make that clear. So what are we talking about here? Well, Keir Starmer, among a lot of different things that he said, it was a long news conference, and among those, he said that they're going to demolish, Freudian slip, the NHS England and bring it back under democratic management. Now, this could either turn out to be one of the most genius things that he's ever done, and further down the line, we'll look back and think, well, now we have a fantastic healthcare service that is operating smoothly under efficient management, saving money, not wasting money. Or it could be the catalyst to destroying the NHS entirely. Now, where do we stand on this? Right, well, let's look at a lot of criticism that the NHS has had over recent years, first of all. And if we start going back in time, this is not out of the blue announcement from Keir Starmer. There's been lots of more than hints about this over previous months. In fact, if we go back to October, I can show you this press release here. Major crackdown on NHS waste. This was obviously this new Labour government's approach to healthcare, and a major crackdown on the waste in the NHS, because actually the numbers are quite staggering. And now this is not, some people will be pleased, a few of you will be pleased to know this is not a Labour bashing session, but a major wastage in the NHS, all under the management of NHS England. And you'll recall that I had my own criticisms of data sharing plans and all of this sort of stuff, which I'll try and find and link previous videos. But if we look here, and this is going back to, this is a Daily Mail of all articles, to December 2022 for some context. So this has been, the reason for the old article is to show you that this has been ongoing for some time, where the money goes and where the money is wasted. Now, they were talking even then about clinical negligence, waste/spend of £2 billion, and prescription of what would otherwise be over-the-counter medicine, such as paracetamol, or paracetamol if you insist. But the wastage of prescription on something that would otherwise be straightforward over-the-counter stuff is actually quite staggering. Now, what's also quite staggering, for a quick little story, is what's happening with my ex-mobile phone provider, because they sent me another bill, even though I've already left them. Now, this is not to be confused with an overlap bill or a transition bill or anything. The dates coincided perfectly, and they told me so. My contract finished the day my number moved to the other company. The bill was for another month, and so when I queried it, they said, well, you'll get a refund at the end of this month when the final bill's produced, and it will discount this month's money. And I said, well, what's the point in that? Why should I pay it then to wait for a refund? And he said, don't worry about it. It will be refunded and whatever. So all the more reason it was a sensible idea to move to another network. But very shortly, I'm going to be traveling far, far from here. So I need reliable internet access. And so I'm going to use Saley, because when I first had these problems, I connected with Saley to partner for my channel, because Saley is an eSIM data provider for your mobile phone. You download the app, you buy a plan for your destination, and you'll get seamless internet access on connection when you arrive. Saley works in hundreds of countries, and you don't need to wait for a plastic SIM to arrive in the post. You just download it and install the SIM on your phone or your device, and it will give you seamless access to the internet. And because it's provided to you by NordVPN, you get many security features that you might expect as well, such as a virtual location, so you can prevent all the hiccups that you might get being in another country when you access banking apps and things like that. but also you can block intrusive ads. And of course, you get web protection to protect you from malicious websites, malicious downloads, which is all the more important when you go to another country, you're not familiar with the destination, and you're certainly not familiar with the Wi-Fi networks or even any other networks that you might connect to while you're out there. And of course, as a partner to my channel, you get a great discount, which is 15% off any plan you choose to buy using the code BlackBeltBarrister at the checkout. So you can download the app immediately, so it's ready for when you do travel. Then when you are traveling, you can pick a plan for your destination, pay for it, remembering to use the code BlackBeltBarrister to get 15% off the plan, and then it will activate seamlessly when you arrive at your destination, giving you safe and secure access to the internet with the virtual location so that it will prevent all these problems you get from being in another country. So I'm definitely going to use Saley for seamless internet. I'll report on it when I'm out there. Check it out in the description below. Don't forget the discount with BlackBeltBarrister, and thank you to Saley for sponsoring this video. So for instance, people are coming in with aches and pains and being prescribed paracetamol, which is available obviously over the counter within certain age limits and purchase limits and so on. This is not medical advice, you understand. But they've been prescribed paracetamol for general aches and pains, and that has cost the health service £74 million. And this is just the statistic for 2021 to 2022. Not only that, on completely separate things, gas and electricity, it was researched and reported the Taxpayers Alliance analysed that for 2019 to 2020, they were wasting huge amounts of money and wasting nearly £220 million a year on overpriced gas and electricity. Fast forward to December 2023, so a bit of a timeline going here, and this is just the last few years. It was reported in the BBC the NHS spent more than £384 million on agency staff in the northwest of England over the last 3 years, all according to statistics from the Royal College of Nursing. So why is that important? Well, it may not be obvious to you that agency staff is obviously going to be more expensive than full-time staff. So ergo, there is a lack of management of the staff that they actually need. And so to plug shortages of staff because either they haven't planned for the staff they need, or they get what they call a regrettable turnover, which is a churning over, staff leaving and staff coming in, and there's a gap in between, and so they need agency staff to fill those gaps, and essentially they need a huge amount of money, £384 million for that for those 3 years to plug these gaps of staff. And this was criticised as a false economy because they could have employed over 4,000 full-time staff instead of employing these agency staff. Now, the crackdown on wasted expenditure was announced by this government in October 2024 and included things such as waste of disposable medical devices and single-use items, which aside from the cost alone was contributing to 156,000 tonnes of clinical waste produced every year alone. Other examples quoted included the Mid Yorkshire Trust using 330,000 single-use tourniquets in a year, but a single reusable tourniquet can be used 10,000 times. In a one-year trial, reusable alternatives saved £20,000 in procurement, and that's just for one simple item. In Northampton Hospital's NHS Trust, a single ophthalmology department saved 1,000 pair of disposable scissors and £12,000 in 1 year just by switching to reusable pairs of scissors. These are the kind of things that we're talking about here, using reusable items as opposed to single-use items and saving thousands of pounds of money. Now, I've had people within the NHS talking to me recently, and you might be aware that certain people get criticised for whistleblowing and things like that, but I've had people talk to me telling me that they have thousands of pounds wastage almost daily in their everyday work because somebody might open the wrong item. But because it's a very expensive single value item and single use item, that is then just going straight in the bin because it was the wrong thing. And when you multiply this across thousands and thousands of items across all the trusts across the country, it is quite obvious then how much of this money can then get wasted. Now, it will be interesting to see whether there is cross-party collaboration and agreement on this, because as I said at the outset, and it's not just scaremongering, this could either be the most genius plan moving forward, because I know a lot of people within the NHS say that the management of the NHS is just not up to scratch and it really needs to be revamped, or It could be the thing that leads to the destruction of the NHS, breaking it apart, selling it off, privatizing certain areas of it. And the reality is something we will only discover much later on, either when it's worked or when it's too late to do anything about it. But the real question here is probably one of control. And as with anything that is under somebody's control, you need to ask yourself, do you trust the people in control? Now, to be fair, I know a lot of people do trust that this is a sensible way forward, a sensible decision, and that it's under strong leadership and so on. But equally, I understand that there are a lot of people that are very concerned and don't think that this is under strong leadership and don't think that this is proper management. Now, Keir Starmer today was saying that he's bringing the management of the NHS as a whole back into democratic control. So that should really mean that there are different voices heard, there are different ideas heard, they are debated properly, and ultimately it is a fair and well-managed and balanced system. He said that this move will put the NHS back at the heart of government where it belongs. He says freeing it to focus on patients, less bureaucracy with more money for nurses. He says that the NHS will refocus on cutting waiting times in your hospital, you the viewer, wherever you live. But another very important point is that because NHS is a devolved matter, obviously this can only pertain to England because, as the name suggests, NHS England is responsible for England and it'll be a separate matter for Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. And finally, one question I would have if it were posed to government is, what about patient data? Because you might remember from nearly 3 years ago now, I did a video on NHS Digital, which has now been merged with NHS England, and they were making your data available to third parties. And this was an opt-out as opposed to an opt-in. So you had to go through the process of opting out to prevent them from sharing your data, rather than opt in to allow them to share your data. Now, there were counter arguments to that because obviously to do research and to find new cures and things like that, they do need data to work with. But at the same time, the data was what they called pseudonymized rather than anonymized. So with some work, you could trace the information back to the original person. So it wasn't entirely anonymous. So there were criticisms with that. So there were counter-arguments to it, but a lot of people felt that they didn't want their data shared with third parties, which ultimately might end up the data might be sold to other parties. And this is a concern that I have here, because if the NHS management is brought back under what they call democratic control, which is back into government, how do we know and how can we be assured that decisions made for the NHS, the management of the NHS, and ultimately you and your data, your patient data and what's going on with you, how can we be sure that that is always going to be in your interests and is not going to be sort of sliced and carved up in order to sell it on to third parties? That is a concern that I would have, and something that certainly needs to be monitored to make sure that doesn't happen to the detriment of the general public. That is certainly something I'll be keeping my eye on. So for that alone, please subscribe to the channel because I will come back and talk to you about that if I find anything going on about that. But I hope that is a broad overview of what's going on. The NHS isn't suddenly disappearing, as I think at least some people will probably think, but certainly the management of it is going to be abolished and brought back under government, which is either a genius thing or a recipe for disaster. Let me know which side of the fence you fall there. I think this is a very, very difficult one to call. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you've had experience, you can email me anonymously. I will keep your anonymity, absolutely. But share any message that you might have if you wish me to. Let me know what your position is, what your views are if you're working, particularly if you're working within the NHS. Let me know how it is for you. I know some people have done already. You know who you are. And so let me know what you think. Do subscribe to the channel. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.